I'm just curious to start with, how did you start down the road of putting together all of these pieces to show us the way that you did this evening?
Homeschool. Learned how to read, learned how to research, stayed curious, assumed everyone was lying to me, found the answers myself. But I mean, really, like, I want to tell you guys, it's not a forgotten history, it's a hidden history. So I was at Pastor Jack Hibbs' church, who's my earthly hero and mentor. I call him the pastor that America needs but doesn't deserve, kind of like Batman. And we were there in January for a thing he does happening now. And we talked on stage for 90 minutes, like this. So it's, I don't know, 2,100 people in the audience. And I said, by raise of hands, and you gotta understand, Pastor Jack Hibbs probably has one of the most politically astute and culturally engaged and informed congregations in America. And I asked, how many people in the audience have ever heard of the Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell? 3 hands. There's over 2,000 people in a live audience. And Pastor Jack is one of the most incredible, like, shepherds in equipping and educating his people. Buck versus Bell is a Supreme Court decision that allowed the state to forcibly sterilize people that the elites considered a threat to the gene pool. Do you understand that was America first, not the Nazis? So ever heard of the Nuremberg trials? Well, at the Nuremberg trials, okay, trip out, get ready, grab your barf bag. The Nazis cited our Supreme Court decision, Buck versus Bell, in their defense. As if to say, who are you to judge us? You freaking Americans were doing eugenics before we were. One of Hitler's henchmen, you'll learn about him in the book. Actually, we have I added a couple things to the film that's releasing on X, a couple little things that weren't in this version. And one of Hitler's henchmen, Hans F. Gunther, who was very high up in the Third Reich, called Lothrop Stoddard, remember the KKK guy who sat on the board of Planned Parenthood? Hitler's henchmen called that guy one of the spiritual fathers of Nazi Germany. So, like, why did I have to do my own research, is the question? Because this stuff has been hidden from the American people. I have this study on eugenics in American history textbooks, and it's a study someone did on the 9 most commonly used history high school textbooks in American public schools. The 9 most commonly used history textbooks in American public schools. All 9 of them have basically nothing on the woman Margaret Sanger, the American eugenics movement, and the Supreme Court decision Buck versus Bell. Oh, there's a bunch in there about Dred Scott v. Sanford. But on a very also wicked decision, like the states can tie you down to a table and sterilize you against your wishes because the libs don't think you should reproduce. Not really anything in there in the textbooks about that. And if these 9 textbooks did refer to any of those things, it was a passing reference and it didn't actually educate young minds and students about these stuff. So that's just one example of how, like, they have actually tried to hide this stuff. Okay? You're not a conspiracy theorist. That's just been the goal. And so that was the beginning, seeing those kinds of things. And then, of course, when, how we opened the film, it's like, Hillary Clinton gets a Margaret Sanger Award, and Nancy Pelosi gets a Margaret Sanger Award, and the Smithsonian had a bust of Sanger's face. It's like, we name our clinics after Margaret Sanger, and then in summer of 2020, cancel her! Because of BLM canceling everything that's racist. Just so you know, it wasn't conservatives that attacked Planned Parenthood the summer of 2020, just so you understand. It was BLM, Antifa, George Floyd, everything's racist, cancel Aunt Jemima syrup lady, cultural Marxist leftists. It was them that attacked Planned Parenthood in July of 2020. I hope you know that. It was the leftists who favor abortion who said, but Planned Parenthood, your founder was a racist. And so they cancel her because of pressure from the left. And that's when I went, wait a second, you defended this woman for 100 stinking years. You gave out an awards in her names, and now she's cancel-worthy? So those were some of the beginning things that made me go, I think you're hiding. I think you're lying to me. And so now we got to wake up the church. Can you imagine if, like, every Christian high school, homeschool, co-op, faith-based school in America played this film for the next generation? What if this was like mandatory viewing for like every young person in America. I mean, this will never get into the public schools, but like just consider the power.
Never say never.
Never say never. Just consider the power that this film has. Hey, knowledge is power. And once you understand things, people do begin to live differently, pray differently, and vote differently. And so that was why.
So just to be clear, they took her name off of everything, but did they change anything else?
Right, so isn't that the funny part? Because if you know anything about CRT, critical race theory, right? And these like leftists, part of critical race theory and critical theory, which comes from the Frankfurt School, by the way. Anyway, actually, raise a hand. Anyone know what the Frankfurt School is? 1, 2, be brave. Come on, Ron. I met you this morning. How you doing, brother? 3, Frankfurt School. Anyone else? 3, 4, 5. So, see? And y'all are vintage. You guys are epic. Like, you're a great church. So can you imagine what like an Andy Stanley church would have to say to that question? Or like Stephen Furtick preaching in his Yeezys, you know what I mean? Or Rick Warren when he gets back from Davos because he's hanging out with Klaus Schwab and he's got to come back and preach on the purpose-driven life at Saddleback. Like this is vintage church. Y'all are awesome. And only 5 of you raised your hand. I'm not like attacking. I love you guys, right? I'm trying to get Stephen's biceps. So I'm just saying, like, can you imagine like churches that don't care about the culture and they don't engage these issues? It would be 0 hands. Do you understand? So critical theory, I actually am answering your question. I'm not going on a tangent here, but comes from the Frankfurt School. It was German Jews in Frankfurt, Germany. That's why it's called the Frankfurt School. But some of them were German Jews, and so they feared Hitler. So they moved the Frankfurt School to Columbia University. And they became the fathers of the radical hippie movement and the radical yippie movement. And later they became tenured professors at American universities. Oh, it's all making sense. The Frankfurt School was based off of the prison letters and the intellectual bastard thought child of Antonio Gramsci. Has anyone heard of Antonio Gramsci? Gramsci, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. About the same people that know the Frankfurt School. Yeah, exactly. So he was kind of the intellectual bastard thought child of the founding of the Frankfurt School. Gramsci went afoul of Mussolini and spent the rest of his life in prison. And while in prison, he wrote a lot of crap, a lot of ideas. And recently, an American leftist professor who's an expert on Gramsci translated his prison letters into English so purple-haired lesbian dance theory majors at UC Berkeley can study Gramsci and the Frankfurt School. And he's a professor named Joseph Buttigieg, who's the father of a certain Mayor Pete Buttigieg. So if you ever wondered, like, I think Pete's a Marxist. Yes, actually. That's not just like a conservative, like below the belt, like attack. Like literally, the dude's a Marxist. His dad's one of the most like crazed, kooky Marxists in America, who's like the expert on Gramsci. Anyways, I actually am answering the question. Just give me a homeschool second. And so, so one of the strategies of the Frankfurt School and cultural Marxism is a phrase from Gramsci. It's called the strategy of the robes. And the strategy of the robes is basically this. Burning down Minneapolis and Ferguson and a Chaz Chop police-free zone in Seattle, these things are not working to usher in the revolution. And so we need to approach it culturally, and we need to try to control the robes of the academia, the courts, the scientific organizations, and the clergy. Because then that way, once we change the culture, the revolution can happen without guns, because we would have fundamentally altered the culture itself. You've heard the phrase, the long walk through the institutions. That's the strategy of the robes. That's what the cultural Marxists have done. My point is, that's where critical race theory comes from, and critical theory, from the Frankfurt School. And one of the sort of precepts of critical theory is that if something is based and founded on overt racism and bigotry, you can't redeem that thing. It has to be burnt to the ground and remade from the ashes. So defund the police. Tear down the statues of the forefathers. Anything that had like a seed of racism, think of it this way. If the seed's racist, you can't save the tree. You can't just trim racist twigs and branches. The root is still racist, so you got to burn the whole thing down. Plant a new vineyard, plant new trees. To which I always said, now do Planned Parenthood. Yeah. Right? Because they're like, hey, Planned Parenthood, your founders are racist. It's like, wait, we had to cancel the syrup lady. And I can't even buy Aunt Jemima syrup anymore. But you launched the Negro Project with a board member whose books were Hitler's favorites? I'm sorry. So you take her sign off and you say she's a racist, but you still took $700 million of my taxpayer dollars in 2023, and you're still doing all the same things that you were doing before you canceled her. I think this is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing.
Wow. If you guys haven't started taking notes yet, now would be a good time. You're smarter with a pen. About 3 years ago, we started the process of planting our church down in Liberty Hill.
Come on.
And as we got into that, we noticed that the spiritual warfare started to ramp up to the point that about a month before we launched, my wife was hit, T-boned just a crazy thing, inches away from being a life-altering incident. We were feeling it all over the place. You're stepping into some deep and dark waters. I'm curious what kind of spiritual warfare that you have encountered as you've launched into this space in this way.
Yeah, I mean, so we launched the White Rose Resistance like right after Roe got overturned. So my ministry is only 2.5 years old, and we're now the fastest growing pro-life organization in America. But yeah, praise God. And the film hasn't even come out. But, you know, I have the honor, it's a total honor. I mean, like, to fight is an honor, you know? Like I want to tell you, like, you were made to fight, okay? Man or woman. Listen. God knew that she was going to eat the apple. Okay. Like, he knew that everything was just going to, like, fall apart really, 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 really quickly. So, like, someone has to stand against the madness, right? And by the way, he's just as responsible. The Genesis says, and Adam, who was with her, took some too. Okay. And they both screwed up. Collective, okay. So, like, God knew this would happen, which means that, like, human beings, like, created in the image of God, if you're living in humble service to your king, like, you were made to fight. And it's an honor to fight. And we experience spiritual warfare. But, dude, when we decided to make a film, like, some spiritual warfare here and there, I think, is normal when you're tearing down high places and coming for Satan's pride and joy, the destruction and dissection of children. And I don't say that, like, hyperbolically. That is Satan's pride and joy. But we decided to make a film, and it was just like, I have never had more canceled flights, driving through the night to get to Raleigh to film with Pastor John Amanchukwu. Then, of course, I go to Munich right after my daughter's birthday in December, just last year, 10 months ago. I get to Atlanta, my nonstop to Munich gets canceled. So then I have to go to Amsterdam to Frankfurt, and then a 5-hour train ride from Frankfurt to Munich. My bag never makes it to Europe. So all my really nice clothes, because, like, I'm in a movie, you know, like, I'm making a movie, like, I have to look, I want to look good, you know. And so I don't have any of my nice clothes for filming. Like, I'm still in the underwear and socks from the plane ride into Germany. Like, I'm feeling really like grungy, you know. And I'm like, where's my freaking bag? And they're like, oops, sorry. Didn't make it on the plane. It's in Atlanta. Yeah, I'm not saying that losing your bag is spiritual warfare. I'm getting there. Like, you heard the phrase, like, don't give Satan too much credit, you know? Like if you stub your toe, don't be like, screw you, Satan. Like, maybe you're just not coordinated. Maybe the lights weren't on. But anyway, so I lose my bag. And then the morning we're supposed to go film, I have to go, like, buy clothes. Like, 40 minutes before we start filming, I have to go to Hugo Boss or whatever's open. I have to, like, I gotta get a bunch of clothes, right? And then I meet my video crew after I get my clothes, and we're standing ready to get back in the car. And an icicle falls off of a Munich building, knocks off a piece of metal from the building, comes down 5 stories, misses my camera guy's head by, like, inches. Like, falling from, he's like, oh gosh! Like, lands right next to him, and all the equipment in his head's, like, right here. I was like, we haven't even started filming! And then here's where it, like, really got gnarly. So we filmed at the graveside of Sophie and Hans, who I named my 3rd child after. And Sophie had just turned 1. She's almost 2 now, but that's her. So she had just turned 1 on December 1st, and then, like, on the 8th, I flew to Munich. So I go visit the graveside of my daughter's namesake who had her head chopped off for defying the Nazis. And then we do that filming at the graveside that you saw. I go to the hotel, and I think Munich's like 7 hours ahead of Kansas City, where my family is. And I get a FaceTime call from my wife, who's in the back of an ambulance with Sophie. And I'm like, what's going on, babe? She's like, Sophie just had a seizure. And luckily, my wife was at her parents' house. And Sophie's eyes rolled back. She started turning purple. She wasn't breathing. I guess we learned that this was probably a febrile seizure, but I didn't know what that was. And I guess she was breathing, like your body kicks into protecting itself, but like we didn't know what was going on. So my wife in that moment thought that like our daughter Sophie was dying. Thankfully, she came to. And if you know anyone that's had a seizure, like you're pretty like, you're not fully there. You're like really out of it, even when you come to. And so my wife freaked out and called the ambulance. She's had 2 seizures since. So she's had 3 seizures, and she's not even 2 yet. But like having that happen like 4 hours after I was at the graveside of her namesake, those were some of the things. It was like, it felt so demonic. You know, like it felt in that moment as if like the enemy was saying, you know, you continue to make this film. You know, you'll be visiting your own Sophie's graveside soon. You know, that's what it felt like. And so there was a lot more stuff, but that was, I don't think that was a coincidence. It felt too weird. So.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that with us. Obviously, we should pray for Seth and for other pastors and leaders who are stepping into territory that the enemy has kept under wraps for quite some time. Okay, so the Supreme Court comes and they overturn Roe v. Wade and they kick it back to the Roe v. Wade and they kick it back to the states, and now everybody's like in coast, like, woohoo, it's over. There's no more abortion, but that's not really true. What's been happening since then that we need to know about?
Well, the abortion industry, I think, might have been starting to see the writing on the wall when Trump was elected in 2016. And by the way, like I'm one of the few pro-life leaders with a big organization who ripped Trump a new one on social media whenever he deserves it. And that's because...
And his wife now, as of yesterday.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to talk about that right now. But that's, guys, there's a word for that. It's just called self-government. Like if you're so devoted to Trump, and I voted for him both times, but like if you're so devoted to Trump that you're not willing to call out evil, even when it comes from the mouth of those that you voted for and plan on voting for again, you're not good at self-government. Okay, like they serve at our pleasure and consent. Our consent is our vote. If you stay silent while even people you voted for or like are saying stupid, evil stuff that is not in alignment with the voter base or with what pleases Jesus, you should speak out. And sometimes, guess what? Politicians listen because they fear losing your vote. That's self-government in action. But most evangelicals are not loud enough against Republicans when they say progressive junk that Republican rhinos, like Mitt Romney kind of people, they know that like, oh, I'll always get the evangelical vote no matter what. I just think they should fear us a little more. And so I'll speak out against Trump whenever he deserves it. However, my point is this. I think him getting elected and seeing the age of some of the Supreme Court justices in 2016, I think the abortion industry started seeing some of the writing on the wall. I think they were more confident that Roe might get overturned than most pro-lifers. And it did. And so they had to prepare for that. The main way they prepared for that was ramping up the abortion pill. So 10 years ago, the abortion pill accounted for something like 28 or 30% of the nation's abortions. Last year, 64%. Cheap to manufacture, sell at high margins, doesn't require brick and mortar abortion clinics. Because you know that's snail mail now, right? Did you know that? The RU486 abortion pill, it's mainly snail mail. Postal service. So you don't need a building to run it. You don't have to hire a staff to run that abortion center because you don't need one. And then a few years ago, they moved it from 8 weeks to 10 weeks when you could take the abortion pill. And there's people in the FDA right now trying to push it to 12 weeks the entire first trimester. So they were preparing for this. They were ramping this thing up. First 100 days of the Biden administration, what do? Move the abortion pill to fully available via snail mail. I call it mail order murder. So I told you this morning, if you were at some of the services, like that's the new thing now. even in like more conservative states that have banned abortion like Texas or nearly banned it, it's made almost no difference. Now, that doesn't mean that the overturning of Roe wasn't a good thing. Of course it was, and God used it. The overturning of Roe wasn't the end of the pro-life movement, it was the beginning of the pro-life movement in a very real way. Because now cowardly Mitt Romney rhino Republican leaders at various state levels can no longer say, our hands are tied because Supreme Court, Roe v. Wade, that's federal. No, now it's back to the states, which makes your voice that much more important as we the people. Amen. To hold Republican legislators, candidates, those that will run for office, to a higher standard. If you want our vote, you better abolish abortion completely. So there's a lot more that we need to be doing. But unfortunately, that's kind of where the fight's gone. Last thing on the abortion pill, it almost comes from the Nazis. Almost. So Roussel Ucloff is RU 486. They put their initials in the RU, Roussel Ucloff. That's the French pharmaceutical company that created the abortion pill. Well, Roussel Ucloff has a majority shareholder named Hoechst AG. Hoechst AG co-founded a German chemical company called IG Farben, who later was infamous for creating a cyanide gas known as Zyklon B, the gas used to poison Jews in Nazi death camps. So Hoechst AG simply shifted from creating poison to murder Jews to creating poison to murder babies. It's the same company. So.
Seth, I think I know the answer to why most pastors won't talk about this. I love pastors, but there are a lot of cowards that operate in fear over faith. But I'm curious, why do you think it is that the majority of Christians are silent on this issue? Do you think it's ignorance, apathy, combination of both? What's your sense as you go to churches all across America and talk to people about this?
Well, the churches that really need my message wouldn't let me enter the foyer. So like, most of the churches that have me are pretty like epic. They're pretty fired up, courageous people like you. So regarding the cowards, I can speak to that from experience on the streets, having conversations with friends, trying to get churches to wake up. But the churches that have me, I think, are like pretty ballsy. You know, I don't think, I said the phrase testicular fortitude in the pulpit today. And
I did hear that.
I wasn't thrown out, so. But, we're running short on time, but that question deserves a really long answer. There's many reasons. Some of it is ignorance. Some of it is cowardice. I called it the spirit of Lot this morning. Good men who know better, but if the evil gets too close to their front door, and it might compromise their comfort or their standing in their city, they'll just as quickly hand over their own daughters so they can remain relevant. Or sometimes it's actually financial. There's a lot of pastors in America who might be personally pro-life, like. Personally, they might think it's not a great thing, but they haven't preached against the spirit of the age and the evils of American society ever. And so now here's this pastor who just bought a massive church building and has a huge mortgage, and he's got a huge staff. And he goes, if I follow the spurring on of the Spirit, because I do know that the ABC is wrong, I could lose 40% of my congregation who doesn't agree. How am I going to pay the mortgage on the building? Yeah, that's called the idol of mammon. Okay, there's like biblical terms for this kind of idolatry. No. Cut it out. Be faithful, speak the truth in love, leave the results to God, let the chips fall where they may. Okay? It's disgusting. That's man's wisdom. That's not God's wisdom. That's our conniving and trying to create the situation in which impact in ministry happens. Rather than being faithful and saying, all right, God, if you don't build this house. I think we've been relying on our own genius for far too long from the pastors of America. And so I'll say what I said this morning. Leonard Ravenhill said the reason we have so many pygmies in our pews is because we have so many puppets in our pulpits. Okay.
That's great. So even in the church, we have a lot of keyboard warriors who will get active from behind a screen, but struggle sitting like this. And we're coming into the holiday season where we get to see that good F word called family.
Dinner conversation.
A lot. Dinner conversations, Thanksgiving and Christmas.
Invite me over.
See me after. I'll give you guys all his number, and you can all invite him. I'm just kidding. I won't do that. What's your advice for us when it comes to practical, real-life conversations with friends and family? People we could perhaps actually influence, but relationships that really matter that we could also lose.
Yeah. So you got to know context, right? Like, for example, if I had a family member who's like, God loves abortion, okay, it's bodily autonomy. He gave us freedom and liberty. Liberty means the right to make your own decisions. How I respond to that family member at Christmas dinner is way different than a post-abortive mother who's hurting from making her choices. It's way different than like Uncle Bob, who's been an idiot his whole life and is an alcoholic, couldn't tell you any of his city council members or mayor. And it's like, I think it should be a woman's choice. You know, like I'm probably going to respond a little more tactfully, a little more graciously. But some people deserve like a pretty brutal shutdown. Here's what I mean. Have you ever noticed how differently Jesus would speak to people? So how does he speak to the enslaved? Woman at the well. Super graciously. How did he speak to the enslavers? Whitewashed sepulchres, valley of dry bones, who serve your father Satan. Well, that's not very winsome, Jesus. You're harming your Christian witness. You're harming your Christian witness in the public square. And remember, Sadducees, you know he said that to Sadducees? You probably know this, you guys love the Bible, but like Sadducees were both religious and political leaders. So he called politicians whitewashed tombs and a valley of dry bones. Context. So like, know who you're talking to at Christmas dinner and tailor how you, and what percentage of energy and, you know, are you doing a smackdown, right? Or are you, you know, sneaking past watchful dragons? Like, know your context, right? So I could say a lot more about that, but, you know, be gracious, be loving. But there are times when an Elijah sort of, we have way too many Obadiahs in the church and we need a little bit more Elijahs who say, where is your God? Is he on the pooper? Does he have a tummy trouble? Does he, I don't know where Baal, the fire, I don't know, like, heaven, like, you know, is he constipated? Can I give him a laxative? Like that's in the Bible. That's how Elijah contended with the spirit of the age, was to make jokes about the bowel movements of pagan demon gods. You just need to know when and how.